Elena asked Rosa to set up a meeting with Daniel. Rosa looked at her for a long moment before agreeing to ask him. 3 days later, Daniel stood in Elena's penthouse again, but everything felt different this time. He wore jeans and a plain shirt, nothing fancy. He'd quit the warehouse job 2 weeks ago, finally able to breathe without the weight of night shifts crushing him. The viral moment had bought him that, at least. Time to think, time to decide what came next. "Thank you for coming," Elena said. They sat in her living room, the Steinway visible in the background. "Would you like something to drink?" "I'm fine." The silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. Elena had rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but now that he was here, the words felt wrong. "I've been following your story," she started. "The opportunities you're getting. It's remarkable." Daniel nodded but said nothing. His face was carefully neutral. "I wanted to apologize," Elena continued, "for how I treated you after the party. The $200, it was insulting. I should have recognized what I was witnessing. Should have done more. Why didn't you?" The question was direct, no politeness softening it. Elena felt herself wanting to deflect, to make excuses. Instead, she forced herself to be honest. "Because I didn't see you as someone who mattered." "Not really. You were Rosa's son. Temporary help. I heard you play. I recognized the talent somewhere in the back of my mind, and I chose to ignore it because it didn't fit into my understanding of the world." Daniel's expression didn't change. "At least you're honest about it. I want to make it right. I want to fund your education. Completely. Any school you choose, all expenses covered, plus a living stipend, and I'll take care of your mother's medical expenses so you don't have to worry about her." Elena had expected relief, gratitude, maybe even tears. Instead, Daniel leaned back in his chair and studied her face. "Why?" "Because you deserve support." "Because I should have offered this weeks ago. Because it's the right thing to do, is it? Or is it because everyone knows who I am now? Because the internet made you look bad?" Elena felt her face flush. "That's not fair. Isn't it, though? If that video never went viral, you wouldn't even remember my name. Now you want to be my patron, my savior? The rich lady who helps the poor talented kid? I'm trying to help you. Why should I accept help from someone who needed the whole world to tell her I was worth helping?" The words stung because they were true. Elena sat with that truth for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't deserve to be part of your story now. But the offer stands anyway. What you do with it is up to you." Daniel was quiet, his jaw tight. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How much did this penthouse cost?" Elena blinked, surprised by the question. "I don't see how that's relevant." "How much?" $16 million. Daniel laughed, sharp and bitter. $16 million. My mom works for you for 15 years. She cleans your floors, organizes your closets, makes your life run smoothly. How much do you pay her?" "Daniel, your mother's salary is between her and me. But it's not enough to afford her medication without help, is it? Not enough to live without stress. You have $16 million in real estate. You own a piano worth more than my mom makes in 3 years. And you gave me $200. What do you want me to say?" "I don't want you to say anything. I want you to understand why your offer, as generous as it sounds, feels empty. You're not doing this because you care about me. You're doing it because you feel guilty. Because people are judging you. That's not help. That's damage control." Elena felt anger rising, defensive and hot. But underneath it was something else. The recognition that he was absolutely right. "So you'll refuse?" Daniel stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city stretching below them. "I don't know yet. I need to think about it. The schools won't wait forever, I'm aware." He turned back to face her. "Here's what I do know. This whole thing, the viral video, the attention, it's shown me something. Talent isn't enough. Being good isn't enough. You have to be seen. And being seen, for people like me, it's random. It's luck. If that girl hadn't recorded me, if the algorithm hadn't picked it up, I'd still be loading trucks and playing piano in church basements. Nothing about my talent changed. Only visibility changed. That's the way the world works. Yeah, but it shouldn't be. There are thousands of kids like me. Talented kids in poor neighborhoods in small towns. Working regular jobs because nobody with resources bothered to look. Because people like you walk past us every day and don't see us as human. We're just the help. Just background. Just not important enough." Elena had no response. She'd never thought about it that way. Never considered how many talented people she'd probably encountered and dismissed over the years. The idea was overwhelming and uncomfortable. Daniel moved toward the door, then paused. "I'll think about your offer. But Mrs. Westbrook, whatever I decide, it won't be because I think you're a good person trying to help. It'll be because I'm practical enough to know that pride doesn't pay tuition." After he left, Elena sat alone in her penthouse for a long time. 3 weeks later, Daniel made his decision. He accepted a full scholarship to the Manhattan School of Music, one of several he'd been offered. But he turned down Elena's additional support, taking only her agreement to cover Rosa's medical expenses directly. He set conditions. The payments would go to a trust that Rosa controlled, not dependent on her continued employment. He also did something else, something that surprised everyone. He started teaching piano to kids in his neighborhood. Free lessons, twice a week in the same church basement where he'd practiced. Kids whose families couldn't afford $50 an hour for private instruction. Kids who might have talent but would never be seen. The news covered it, of course. Viral piano sensation gives back to community. It made a good story. But Daniel ignored most of the attention, focused instead on showing up every Tuesday and Thursday evening with sheet music and patience. One of his first students was a 12-year-old girl named Maya. She had no piano at home, practiced on a printout of a keyboard her mom had taped to the kitchen table. But when Daniel put her hands on real keys for the first time, something lit up in her eyes that he recognized. That hunger. That need to make something beautiful. "How long have you wanted to play?" Daniel asked her. "Forever," Maya said. But lessons cost too much. Daniel thought about all the reasons he'd almost given up on music. Money, opportunity, visibility. The way the world told you your dreams weren't practical. How talent didn't matter if no one with resources bothered to notice. "Well, you're playing now," he said, "and we're going to make sure you keep playing." Elena heard about Daniel's teaching program through Rosa. She didn't say anything at first, just listened as Rosa talked with obvious pride about her son's first recital with his students. 20 kids playing in that church, families packed into folding chairs, nothing fancy but everything that mattered. "He's good with them," Rosa said. "Patient. He remembers what it's like." Elena pulled out her checkbook. Would the church accept a donation? For a better piano? Maybe some instruments? Rosa looked at the check Elena wrote, her expression complicated. $10,000. More than she made in half a year. Money that Elena would barely miss but could change everything for those kids. "I'll give it to Father Miguel," Rosa said. "But Mrs. Westbrook, Daniel won't thank you for this." "I know. That's not why I'm doing it." And maybe that was true. Or maybe Elena was still trying to buy her way out of guilt. She wasn't sure anymore. What she did know was that she'd started noticing things she'd never noticed before. The delivery people who brought her groceries. The doorman who held the elevator. The people who cleaned office buildings at night when everyone else went home. She started a fund quietly through her foundation. Money for music education in underfunded schools. Instruments, teachers, programs. She didn't put her name on it, didn't do press releases. Just moved money to where it might help. Where kids like Daniel might be seen before they needed a viral video to prove they existed. It wasn't redemption. She understood that. You couldn't erase 15 years of not seeing people. Couldn't undo the casual cruelty of dismissal with money. But it was something. A start. 6 months later, Daniel performed at his conservatory debut. A real concert, professional sound, an audience that paid to be there. Rosa sat in the third row, wearing a new dress she'd bought for the occasion. She'd invited Elena, who'd declined, saying she didn't want to make things awkward, but Elena went anyway. She bought a ticket under a different name and sat in the back row, anonymous in the crowd. She watched Daniel walk onto stage in a suit that actually fit, watched him sit at a piano that was his to play, not borrowed or snuck into or played as background noise. When he began playing, the room disappeared. No dinner conversations, no clinking glasses, no wealthy people discussing their investments. Just music, just Daniel, making something beautiful, being seen on his own terms. Elena cried, quiet tears she wiped away quickly, not because the music was sad, but because she finally understood what she'd almost destroyed with her blindness, how close the world had come to losing this because people with power didn't think to look. After the concert, she didn't try to meet him backstage, didn't insert herself into his celebration. She slipped out quietly, back to her penthouse, back to her life. But something had changed in her. She couldn't unsee what she'd finally seen. Couldn't go back to the easy blindness of privilege. Daniel kept teaching, kept performing, built a life that was his own, not shaped by Elena's guilt or her money or the viral video that had started everything. Some of his students would go on to music schools. Some would just play for joy. All of them would know that someone had seen them, believed in them, thought they mattered. And in her penthouse 40 stories above the city, Elena sat at her Steinway and tried to play. Her fingers stumbled over the keys, clumsy and unpracticed. She'd never be good, would never create what Daniel could create, but she played anyway, and she listened. Really listened. To the sound, to the silence, to all the things she'd spent a lifetime refusing to hear. The music was imperfect and honest. And for the first time in a long time, it was enough. Elena first saw the video on a Wednesday morning. She was in her office reviewing quarterly reports when her daughter Rebecca video called from London. "Mom, have you seen this?" "Seen what?" "I'm working. The piano video. It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it." Elena felt a flicker of irritation. Rebecca had a habit of getting excited about internet trends that meant nothing. "I don't have time for viral videos, sweetheart." "Mom, it's from your party. Your dinner party 2 weeks ago." That got Elena's attention. She pulled up the link Rebecca sent and pressed play. The video started mid-performance. Daniel, in his community college hoodie, completely absorbed in playing her Steinway. The camera work was shaky, clearly just someone's phone, but the audio was good enough. Good enough to hear how extraordinary he was. Elena watched it twice. Then she read the caption. "Random college kid playing at a party. Why isn't he famous? 7 million views. Mom, did you know he was that good?" Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. She'd heard him play. She'd stood in her own living room and listened to that exact performance. And yes, she'd known he was talented. Exceptionally talented. She'd felt it in that moment when the room had gone quiet. "I knew he played well," Elena said carefully. "That's it? Mom, people are saying he's conservatory level, professional level, and he was just playing at your dinner party like hired help." "He was helping out. His mother is my housekeeper. It was a last-minute arrangement." Rebecca's face on the screen showed something Elena didn't like. Disappointment. Judgment. "Did you pay him?" "Of course I paid him. How much?" "Rebecca, that's not relevant." "How much, Mom?" Elena felt defensive, which made her angry. She didn't like feeling defensive in her own home about her own choices. $200, which was generous for a last-minute favor. The silence on the other end of the call spoke volumes. "Mom, you spent more than that on the wine at that party?" "That's not the same thing, isn't it?" "This kid Daniel, he's 19. He works night shifts at a warehouse. His mom cleans houses, and he plays like that. And you gave him $200 and probably never thought about him again." "Rebecca, you don't understand how things work. I was helping him. I gave him an opportunity to play a professional-grade instrument. Did you, though? Or did you just use him for cheap entertainment?" The call ended shortly after, both of them upset. Elena sat at her desk staring at her computer screen, the video frozen on Daniel's face. That intensity, that focus. She'd seen it that night and had chosen to ignore it. But she hadn't ignored it, had she? She'd noticed. She'd felt the power of his playing. She'd just decided it didn't require her attention. That he didn't require her attention. Over the next few days, Elena couldn't escape the story. It was everywhere. News articles, social media. Her friends were talking about it. At a business lunch, someone brought up that viral pianist without knowing the connection. "Such a feel-good story," Lawrence said. The same Lawrence who'd been at her party. "Kid comes from nothing, gets discovered by accident. Makes you believe in talent rising to the top." Elena said nothing. She picked at her salad and let the conversation move on. That night, she searched for more information. Found the news segments about Daniel. Watched interviews where he talked about his life, his mother, his work at the warehouse. Saw the church basement where he practiced on a piano that was missing keys. She saw the crowdfunding campaign, the scholarship offers, the opportunities flooding in. And she saw the comments, thousands of them, many asking the same question. How did no one notice him before? One comment in particular stuck with her. That rich lady whose party this was probably didn't give him a second thought. Just another poor kid. That's how the wealthy stay wealthy, by being blind to the people who serve them. Elena closed her laptop harder than necessary. She tried to focus on work. But the story wouldn't leave her alone. A colleague mentioned it in a meeting. Her personal trainer brought it up. Even Rosa, her housekeeper, Rosa, who was Daniel's mother, moved through the penthouse differently now. Quieter, more careful. The dynamic between them had shifted in some subtle way Elena couldn't quite name. A week after the video went viral, Elena's son called from California. "Hey, Mom, saw that whole thing about your maid's kid. Pretty wild. His name is Daniel." "Right, Daniel. Must be weird having that blow up when he was just like playing at your party." "It's fine, and did you know he was that good?" Elena paused. She'd been asked this question a dozen times now by different people. Each time she answered, the words felt more hollow. "I knew he played well. But you didn't do anything about it. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, gentle but clear. What was I supposed to do? Offer to pay for his college? Become his patron?" "I gave him money for his time." "How much?" "Why did everyone keep asking that?" $200. Her son laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Mom, come on. You give the valet more than that at Christmas. That's different. How?" Elena didn't have a good answer. She ended the call feeling angry and defensive, and underneath it all, something that might have been shame. That evening, she stood in her living room looking at the Steinway. She'd bought it because it looked elegant. Because wealthy people had grand pianos in their homes. She'd played it maybe 5 times in 3 years. It was furniture. A status symbol. Daniel had made it sing. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, pulling up the video again. This time she read through the comments. Really read them. This is what happens when rich people don't see the help as human. I bet whoever threw that party didn't even tip him properly. The wealthy are so disconnected from reality. Kid's a genius, and they probably treated him like a servant. Some defended her, said people were being too harsh, but most didn't. Most saw the story as a clear example of class blindness, of privilege creating blindness, of talent being invisible when it came from the wrong economic background. Elena wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that it wasn't like that. She hadn't been cruel. She'd paid him. She'd given him an opportunity to play a beautiful instrument, but the defense felt weak even in her own mind. The truth, the uncomfortable truth she was finally facing, was that she'd heard Daniel play that night. She'd recognized his talent in some distant way, and she'd chosen to do nothing because he was Rosa's son, because he wore a community college hoodie, because he didn't fit into her world, and it was easier to hand him $200 and forget about him. She'd literally listened to genius and decided it wasn't worth her attention. 2 weeks after the video went viral, Elena did something she'd been avoiding. She asked Rosa to stay after work one day. They sat in the kitchen, an unusual arrangement. Rosa looked uncomfortable, perched on the edge of a chair in a space she normally just cleaned. "I wanted to talk about Daniel," Elena started. Rosa's expression became guarded. "He's doing well. The opportunities have been overwhelming, but good. He's meeting with schools next week. That's wonderful. Rosa, I want you to know. I'm very happy for him. He deserves this recognition." "Thank you, Mrs. Westbrook." The formality hung between them. 15 years and they were still Mrs. Westbrook and Rosa. Not friends. Not equals. Employer and employee. "I've been thinking about that night," Elena continued. "About how I handled things. The $200. Rosa's face remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. "It wasn't enough," Elena said. "I should have recognized what your son was, what he is. I should have done more. You gave him a chance to play. I gave him pocket change and dismissed him. Let's be honest about what happened." Rosa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady but firm. "Mrs. Westbrook, with respect, Daniel didn't need you to recognize him. His talent exists whether you see it or not. The video, the attention, it's validating, yes, but he was always this good. He was always worth more than $200. The words hit harder than Elena expected. She'd been preparing to apologize, to make amends, to be the gracious, wealthy person who learned a lesson. But Rosa wasn't giving her that easy out. "You're right," Elena said quietly. "I'm sorry." Rosa nodded, but she didn't say it was okay, because it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in her expensive bed in her expensive penthouse and thought about the last few weeks, about how easily she'd dismissed Daniel, about how the only reason she was thinking about any of this was because the internet had forced her to. If that video had never gone viral, she would have forgotten about him completely. He would have remained just Rosa's son, a forgettable evening, a minor anecdote if she remembered it at all. But he would still have been brilliant. His talent didn't start when the world noticed it. It existed before, invisible to people like her, people who'd trained themselves not to see. Elena thought about all the other Daniels out there. People she'd walked past, employed, dismissed, ignored. How many times had she been blind to someone's humanity because they didn't fit into her narrow view of who mattered? The question kept her up until dawn, uncomfortable and unavoidable. And underneath it all was another question, one she was almost afraid to ask herself. Now that she saw clearly, what was she going to do about it? Olivia Chen had been bored at her father's business dinner. Incredibly mind-numbingly bored. She was 23, fresh out of college, and being dragged to these events was part of what her dad called networking. Really, it was just rich people talking about money while pretending to care about each other's lives. She'd been scrolling through her phone, half listening to some woman complain about her personal trainer when the music changed. Actually changed. Went from pleasant background noise to something that made her look up. The guy playing piano was young, probably around her age, wearing a community college hoodie. And he was playing like his life depended on it. Olivia knew music. She'd taken piano lessons for 10 years before quitting, much to her parents' disappointment. She knew enough to recognize that what this guy was doing was special. Without really thinking about it, she'd pulled out her phone and started recording. Just a short clip, maybe 45 seconds. The way his hands moved across the keys, the intensity on his face, the sound that filled that enormous penthouse. When she got home that night, she'd almost forgotten about the video. But 2 days later, stuck in traffic and scrolling through her camera roll, she found it again. She watched it 3 times, then made a decision. She posted it to her social media with a simple caption, "Random college kid playing at a party. Why isn't he famous?" She had maybe 3,000 followers, mostly friends and people from college. She expected a few likes, maybe a couple comments. That's all. She didn't expect what happened next. By the next morning, the video had 10,000 views. By afternoon, 50,000. People were sharing it, commenting, asking who he was. Music teachers were weighing in. Professional pianists were leaving comments about his technique. The algorithm picked it up, started pushing it to more people. 24 hours after posting, the video had 2 million views. Olivia's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People were messaging her, asking for information. Who was he? Where could they hear more? Was he a professional? News outlets were reaching out, asking permission to use the clip. She read through hundreds of comments, amazed at the response. This is conservatory-level playing. Who is this kid? The technique is flawless. And the emotion. You can't teach that. I'm a piano professor at Berkeley. If anyone knows who this is, please connect us. That's a 200K Steinway, and he's playing it better than most professionals I've seen. Someone else had managed to identify the piece. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most challenging works in classical piano repertoire. People were pointing out specific moments in the video, dissecting his interpretation, praising his control, but nobody knew who he was. Olivia felt something like guilt mixed with excitement. She'd put this kid on the internet without his permission, but also the world needed to hear him. That kind of talent shouldn't be hidden at rich people's dinner parties. 3 days after posting, a local news station in New York contacted her. They'd been tracking the story and had managed to figure out who the pianist was. Daniel Rodriguez, 19, community college student. They'd found him through a combination of digging and luck, tracking down the event location through Olivia's father's business connections. Would you be willing to come on the show to talk about discovering him? The producer asked. I didn't discover him, Olivia said. I just posted a video. But she agreed anyway. Daniel's phone had been acting weird for 2 days. Random numbers calling. Text messages from people he didn't know. Friend requests on social media from strangers. He'd ignored most of it, assuming it was spam or wrong numbers. Then Professor Chen called him 6 times in a row. Daniel finally answered. Daniel, thank God, where have you been? At work? What's going on? You haven't seen it? The video? What video? There was a pause. Check your social media. Right now. I'll wait. Daniel, standing in his apartment in his warehouse uniform, opened his phone and checked. His notifications had exploded. Hundreds of messages. Thousands of new followers. His hands shook as he scrolled through, trying to understand what was happening. Then he found it. The video. Him, playing at Elena Westbrook's dinner party, wearing his hoodie, completely lost in the music. 2.4 million views. 15,000 comments. Professor Chen, what is this? This is your life-changing, Daniel. Do you understand? People are looking for you. Schools, agents, journalists. Everyone wants to know who you are. Daniel sat down hard on his couch. He watched the video, seeing himself from outside for the first time. Was that really how he looked when he played? That focused, that intense? The comments were overwhelming. People praising him, asking about him, offering help. Professional musicians he'd only dreamed of becoming were commenting on his technique. Schools he'd looked at longingly on their websites were asking people to help them find him. This can't be real, Daniel whispered. It's real. And Daniel, there's more. New stations are calling. They want to interview you. The Juilliard School reached out to me directly, asking if you'd be interested in auditioning. The Manhattan School of Music. Curtis everyone. Daniel's mom walked in the door at that moment, home from cleaning houses. She took one look at his face and froze. What happened? Are you okay? Daniel couldn't speak. He just held up his phone, showing her the video. Rosa dropped her purse and grabbed the phone. She watched, her hand over her mouth, tears instantly in her eyes. Then she saw the view count, the comments, and looked at her son with confusion and wonder. I don't understand. How did this? Someone at the party recorded me, posted it. Mom, it went viral. The phrase sounded strange saying it out loud, viral, like it was something that happened to other people, not to warehouse workers from Jersey. Over the next 3 days, Daniel's life became unrecognizable. News crews showed up at their apartment building. His neighbors suddenly knew who he was. The warehouse where he worked called, asking if the famous piano guy on the news was really him. A local news station did a full segment on him. Mystery pianist's identity revealed. He's a community college student working night shifts to support his family. They played the viral clip, interviewed Professor Chen, even got footage of Daniel practicing in the church basement. The story hit a nerve. In a world of wealth and privilege, here was a kid with genuine talent who couldn't afford to pursue it. Working-class genius ignored by the rich. It was the kind of story that made people angry and inspired at the same time. More videos appeared. Someone found footage of Daniel playing at his church. Another person had recorded him at a community college recital. Each one reinforced the same message. This kid was the real deal. Scholarship offers started coming in. Not just one or two, but dozens. Schools were waiving application fees, asking him to audition. A music agent reached out, offering representation. A crowdfunding campaign that Daniel hadn't started or approved of raised $30,000 in 48 hours. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by emails and letters and opportunities that seemed impossible. His mom sat across from him, both of them in shock. What do I do? Daniel asked. Rosa reached across and took his hand. I don't know, mijo. This is bigger than anything I know how to handle. Mom, some of these schools, they're offering full scholarships, everything covered, and money for living expenses. They're saying I could start in the fall. Then you go. But what about you? Your medical bills? The rent? We'll figure it out. Daniel, this is your chance. How many people get a chance like this? Daniel looked at all the papers spread in front of them. Letters from schools he'd only dreamed about. Offers that seemed too good to be true. And in the middle of it all, his phone kept buzzing. More messages, more opportunities, more people wanting a piece of whatever this moment was. It felt surreal. 4 days ago, he'd been loading trucks and playing piano in empty church basements. Now the world was watching, waiting to see what he'd do next. But along with the excitement, Daniel felt something else. Suspicion, doubt, his whole life. People like Elena Westbrook had ignored him, dismissed him, treated him like he didn't matter. Now because of one viral video, everyone suddenly cared? Everyone suddenly wanted to help? Where were these people before? Where were these opportunities when he was 17, already brilliant but invisible? Why did it take 2 million strangers on the internet to make him worth paying attention to? Professor Chen called again that evening. Daniel, I need you to make some decisions. These opportunities won't wait forever. Schools need answers. The agent needs to know if you're interested. There's a television interview scheduled for tomorrow morning if you want to do it. I don't know if I want to do an interview. Daniel, this is your moment. You have to take advantage of it. Do I? Professor, a week ago nobody cared. I was just Rosa's son, playing piano at a rich lady's party for $200. Now everyone cares because I'm a good story? The poor kid who made it? You're more than a story. You're talented. That's what people are responding to. They're responding to the video, to the narrative. Would anyone care if I was just some middle-class kid who played well? Or is it because I work in a warehouse? Because my mom cleans houses? Am I interesting because of the music or because I'm poor? Professor Chen was quiet for a moment. Maybe both. Is that so bad? If it gets you where you need to be? Daniel didn't have an answer. That night he lay in bed, unable to sleep. His phone glowed in the dark, notifications still rolling in. The video had passed 5 million views. People he'd never met were arguing in the comments about his future, making assumptions about his life, claiming to know what was best for him. Tomorrow, a news crew was coming to interview him. Whether he'd agreed to it or not, they'd be there. His story was out there now, public property, and he had no control over it. He thought about Elena Westbrook, wondered if she'd seen the video, wondered what she thought about her maid's son becoming an internet sensation. Did she regret giving him only $200? Did she even remember him at all? The attention was overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once, and underneath it all, Daniel couldn't shake one simple question. If he was good enough now, why wasn't he good enough before? The next morning, Rosa arrived at Elena's penthouse at 7, just like always. She let herself in with her key, moving quietly through the space that still smelled faintly of last night's dinner party. Wine glasses sat on the counter waiting to be loaded into the dishwasher. Someone had left a napkin on the coffee table. Small messes that Rosa would erase, making everything perfect again. She was loading the dishwasher when Elena appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in her usual work uniform of expensive casual clothes. A cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Rosa made in a month. Designer jeans that fit perfectly. Good morning, Mrs. Westbrook. Rosa. Elena opened her refrigerator, pulled out a green juice that her nutritionist delivered weekly. About last night. Your son did adequately. Adequately. Rosa felt something sink in her chest. She'd watched Daniel pour his heart into that piano. She'd seen the guests stop talking, actually stop and listen. And adequately was the word Elena chose. Thank you for letting him play, Rosa said quietly. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out several bills. She counted them carefully and placed them on the kitchen counter. $200 for his time. Rosa stared at the money. $200. The wine they'd served last night cost more than that per bottle. Elena had opened 6 bottles. That's very generous, Mrs. Westbrook. Elena nodded, already checking her phone, moving on to the next thing. He should probably invest in better clothes if he wants to do this professionally. First impressions matter. Rosa said nothing. She took the money and slipped it into her pocket, then returned to loading the dishwasher. Elena disappeared into her home office, the conversation already forgotten. When Rosa got home that evening, she found Daniel asleep, on their apartment couch, still wearing his warehouse uniform. He worked the night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., loading trucks and moving boxes. Then he'd come home, sleep for a few hours, and head to his community college classes in the afternoon. It was brutal, but they needed the money. Rosa's hands shook slightly as she looked at him. Her beautiful, talented boy, exhausted from manual labor. She placed the $200 on the coffee table beside him and went to start dinner. Daniel woke up an hour later, groggy and disoriented. He saw the money and picked it up, counting it. From Mrs. Westbrook, Rosa called from the kitchen, for last night. Daniel walked into the kitchen, still holding the bills. $200? Mom, I played for 3 hours. I know. Did she? Did she say anything else? Rosa kept her eyes on the vegetables she was chopping. She said you did adequately. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. He tossed the money onto the counter. Of course she did. Daniel, don't. Don't what? I saw how they looked at me, Mom. Like I was part of the entertainment. Like the catering staff. Nobody actually cared about the music. He ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. Do you know what that piano costs? I looked it up. $180,000. And she probably doesn't even play it. It's just decoration. You got to play it, though. Yeah, for $200 and the word adequately. Daniel shook his head. I have to get ready for work. He disappeared into the bathroom, and Rosa heard the shower start. She looked at the money on the counter and felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with her job. That night, Daniel arrived at the warehouse at 9:45, giving himself time to change and clock in. The building was massive, loud, and cold. Concrete floors, harsh fluorescent lights, the constant beep of forklifts backing up. He worked alongside guys who'd been doing this for 20 years. Good guys, mostly. They talked about football and cars and complained about their backs hurting. Nobody knew Daniel played piano. He'd never mentioned it. What would he say? Hey, by the way, I can play Rachmaninoff? It didn't fit here. This was the real world, where you got paid by the hour to move boxes from point A to point B. Rodriguez! His supervisor's voice cut through the warehouse noise. You're on loading dock 3 tonight. Truck's already here. Daniel nodded and headed to his station. 8 hours of lifting, loading, scanning boxes. His hands would hurt by the end of the shift. His hands that could create something beautiful if anyone cared enough to listen. He thought about Elena Westbrook's penthouse, the view of the city from 40 stories up, the casual way she'd handed his mother $200 like she was being generous. Like that amount meant something. Daniel had looked up tickets to professional piano concerts once. Good seats at Carnegie Hall cost $200 each. Elena probably paid that much for her monthly manicures. Around 3 a.m. during his lunch break, Daniel sat in the warehouse break room with a sandwich from home. His phone buzzed. A text from Professor Chen, his music theory teacher at community college. Daniel, I listened to that recording you sent. You need to audition for real conservatories. Your technique is beyond anything I can teach you. Call me. Daniel stared at the message. Professor Chen had been pushing him toward this for months. Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, Curtis Institute, schools that seemed like fantasy lands to someone who worked night shifts at a warehouse. He'd looked into it once. Really looked into it. The application fees alone were brutal. $75 here, $100 there. Then you needed to travel for auditions. And if by some miracle he got accepted, the tuition was impossible. Even with financial aid, even with scholarships, there were living expenses, books, fees. His mom needed him. Her medication alone cost $300 a month, even with insurance. Daniel deleted the text and finished his sandwich. At 6 a.m., he clocked out and drove home in his beat-up Honda, the one with the check engine light that had been on for 6 months. He was too tired to fix it, too broke to pay someone else. Rosa was already gone when he got home, off to clean Elena's penthouse, to organize her closets, to make her life run smoothly. Daniel showered and fell into bed, but sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept playing last night over and over, the moment when the room had gone quiet, when they'd actually listened. For 3 minutes, maybe 4, those people had stopped talking about their boats and their investment properties and had actually heard him. Then it was over. Back to being invisible. His phone buzzed again. Professor Chen wasn't giving up. The application deadline for fall admission is in 3 weeks. I know money's tight. Let me help. This is too important. Daniel closed his eyes. Professor Chen was a good man. He'd stayed late countless times to work with Daniel, recognizing something special. But good intentions didn't pay bills. They didn't cover his mom's medical expenses or keep their lights on. He fell asleep thinking about that Steinway piano. The weight of the keys under his fingers. The way the sound had filled that massive penthouse. For 3 hours he'd gotten to play an instrument that was worth more than everything his family owned combined. And he'd earned $200. When he woke up that afternoon, Rosa was home making lunch. She moved carefully, the way she did when her back was hurting. 15 years of cleaning houses, bending and scrubbing and lifting. Mom, sit down. I'll make lunch. I'm fine. You're not fine. Sit. Rosa sat, relief crossing her face as she eased into the chair. Daniel took over at the stove, heating up leftover rice and beans. Mrs. Westbrook asked me today if you'd be interested in playing at another party next month, Rosa said carefully. Daniel's hand tightened on the spoon. What did you tell her? I said I'd ask you. How much? She didn't say. Daniel served lunch, setting a plate in front of his mother. $200. That's what he was worth to people like Elena Westbrook. A cheap evening's entertainment. Less than she'd spent on wine. Tell her no, Daniel said. Daniel. Mom, I have school and work. I can't just drop everything when rich people want background music for their dinner parties. That wasn't the real reason, and they both knew it. The real reason was that playing in that penthouse had hurt in a way Daniel hadn't expected. It had reminded him of everything he wanted and couldn't have, every dream he'd buried under the practical reality of night shifts and community college. Okay, Rosa said softly. I'll tell her. After lunch, Daniel headed to the church basement where Father Miguel let him practice. The piano there was old, some keys stuck, and it was always slightly out of tune. But it was free, and Father Miguel never asked questions. He just handed Daniel the key and left him alone. Daniel sat at that imperfect piano and played. Not for anyone else. Not for $200 or polite applause from people who barely noticed him. Just for himself. Because even if nobody else cared, even if it led nowhere, he couldn't stop. The music was part of him in a way nothing else was. His hands moved across the keys, and for a little while, the warehouse and the bills and the impossible dreams didn't matter. There was only this. Only the music. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent and enormous. And somewhere in a penthouse 40 stories up, Elena Westbrook probably wasn't thinking about him at all. Elena Westbrook stood in her penthouse kitchen, staring at her phone with growing irritation. The caterers were busy in the background arranging appetizers on silver trays, but all she could focus on was the text message she'd just received. Her pianist had canceled. 20 minutes before guests were supposed to arrive, and he had the nerve to cancel. She pressed her fingers against her temples. Tonight was important. Not a massive event, just 12 people, but the right 12 people. Investors, old friends from her tech company days, a couple of board members, the kind of evening where deals got made over wine and casual conversation. And she'd specifically hired a pianist to create that perfect atmosphere of understated elegance. Mrs. Westbrook? Elena turned to see Rosa standing in the doorway, wringing her hands. Rosa had been her housekeeper for almost 15 years, quietly efficient, barely noticeable. Exactly how Elena preferred her staff. What is it, Rosa? I'm dealing with something right now. I'm sorry to bother you. Rosa's accent was slight but present. I heard you on the phone. About the piano player? Elena sighed. Yes, he canceled. Completely unprofessional. Rosa hesitated, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. My son Daniel, he plays piano. If you need someone, I mean. He's not professional or anything, but he's been playing since he was little. Elena looked at her housekeeper properly for the first time that evening. Rosa was in her mid-40s, always dressed in simple, clean clothes, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. In all these years, Elena had never really thought about Rosa having a life outside these walls. A son who played piano. How quaint. Rosa, I appreciate the offer, but I need someone who knows what they're doing. This isn't a children's recital. He's 19, Mrs. Westbrook. He's really good. He plays at our church sometimes. Classical music, like what you play in here. Elena glanced toward her living room, where her Steinway grand piano sat like a piece of sculpture. She'd paid nearly $200,000 for that instrument 3 years ago. Had she played it more than twice? Maybe 3 times. But it looked magnificent against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. She checked her watch. Guests would arrive in 15 minutes. Fine, Elena said, more sharply than she intended. Call him. But Rosa, if he shows up and can't play properly, this reflects on you. Understood? Rosa's face showed relief mixed with worry. Yes, Mrs. Westbrook, thank you. He lives close by. He can be here in 10 minutes. Tell him to wear something presentable. Rosa nodded and hurried away, already pulling out her phone. Elena returned to the living room, adjusting flower arrangements and checking that everything looked perfect. The catering staff moved efficiently, setting up the bar, arranging glasses. The city sparkled below, 40 stories of glass and steel between her and the ordinary world. When the doorbell rang 8 minutes later, Elena was greeting her first guests. She'd almost forgotten about Rosa's son until she saw him standing awkwardly near the entrance, looking completely out of place. Daniel was tall and lanky, wearing jeans and a hoodie that said Hudson County Community College across the front. His sneakers were worn, the kind you bought because they were cheap, not because they were fashionable. He clutched a backpack and looked around the penthouse like he'd walked into a museum. Rosa appeared beside him, speaking quickly in Spanish, straightening his hoodie. Daniel nodded, looking uncomfortable. Elena excused herself from her guests and walked over. "You must be Daniel." "Yes, ma'am." His handshake was firm but nervous. "My mom said you needed a piano player?" "I need background music, nothing dramatic, just something pleasant while people eat and talk. Can you do that?" "Yeah, I can do that. The piano is over there. You can start whenever you're ready." "And Daniel?" Elena looked pointedly at his hoodie. "Next time, wear something more appropriate." She didn't wait for his response. Her guests were arriving and she had to play hostess. Behind her, she heard Rosa whispering to her son, probably apologizing for Elena's terseness. Elena didn't care. The boy was doing her a favor, yes, but she was also giving him an opportunity. Not many 19-year-olds got to play a Steinway. Within 30 minutes, all 12 guests had arrived. Conversation flowed easily. Lawrence talked about his new yacht. Patricia complained about her daughter's choice of colleges, saying Harvard was becoming too common. Someone mentioned the difficulties of finding good investment properties in the Hamptons. Elena had almost forgotten about Daniel when she heard the first notes from the piano. He'd started quietly, gently, something classical that Elena vaguely recognized. She continued her conversation with Robert about cryptocurrency markets, barely paying attention to the music. It was just background noise, filling the space. But then something shifted. Daniel had moved from whatever simple piece he'd started with into something else, something bigger. The notes cascaded through the room, delicate but powerful. Elena found herself pausing mid-sentence, her wine glass halfway to her lips. Around her, conversations were trailing off. Patricia stopped talking about her daughter. Lawrence turned toward the piano. Even the catering staff had slowed their movements, listening. Daniel sat at the piano with his eyes closed, his worn hoodie, completely at odds with the expensive instrument beneath his fingers. But the music he was creating was extraordinary. Elena recognized it now. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. One of the most technically difficult pieces in the classical repertoire, and he was playing it like he'd been born to it. His hands moved across the keys with impossible precision. The soft parts were gentle as rain. The powerful parts thundered through the penthouse. But it wasn't just technical skill. There was emotion in every note, something raw and real that made Elena's chest tighten unexpectedly. She realized she'd been holding her breath. The entire room had gone silent. 12 of the wealthiest, most jaded people in New York stood motionless, watching a community college kid in a hoodie play piano like they'd never heard it played before. When Daniel finally finished, the silence stretched for several long seconds. Then someone started clapping and the rest joined in. Polite applause, the kind you'd give at a concert. Daniel opened his eyes, looking surprised, like he'd forgotten where he was. He nodded awkwardly and immediately started playing something softer, retreating back into background music. Elena stood frozen, her mind racing. She'd heard professional pianists before. She'd attended concerts at Carnegie Hall. She'd paid thousands of dollars to listen to famous performers. But what she'd just witnessed was different. That wasn't just skill. That was genius. She caught Rosa's eye across the room. Her housekeeper was standing near the kitchen doorway, her hand pressed against her mouth, tears in her eyes. Pride and worry mixed on her face. The moment passed. Conversation resumed. Someone made a joke about needing to hire better musicians. Patricia said something about raw talent. And just like that, the guests returned to their discussions about stock portfolios and vacation homes. Daniel's performance became just another story, another piece of entertainment at another dinner party. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling she'd just witnessed something important, something she should pay attention to. Lawrence approached her, champagne in hand. "Where did you find him? That was quite impressive." "Oh, he's just someone's son, filling in last minute."